I'm doing fine, Michael. I have a personal question for you.
A personal question. Okay,
man,
you're going deep out of the gate. All right, sure.
Yeah, I'm going real deep. Personal question. Right out the gate. Are you fake news, Michael?
I am not only fake news, I'm a pioneer in fake news. I have been actually collecting intelligence from the Russians for years. And I'm actually really resenting the fact that so many people are getting in on my business. No, that's a cool question because in some ways, because I guess we're at a point where everybody could be accused of being fake news. And I'm not drawing a false equivalency because there really is fake news. There really is lies. There really are, endless varieties of bullshit and dishonesty. But, we don't have agreed upon frameworks. So I'm sure there are plenty of people who tell you that what I do is fake news. Absolutely.
Well, I mean, there seems to be a formula, right? There seems to be a formula for fake news in the same way there seems to be a formula for whether or not you're part of the resistance. Like, there seems to be a new litmus test coming in the form of, well, are you or are you not critical of the Democratic Party's strategy during the 2016 primary and general election? And if you are, you might in fact be fake news. And if you're not, well, then
you're good. Then you're Gucci. Oh. Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting point. I think what the problem is that I think that some people who critique the Democratic Party and the strategy in 2016, which would include obviously me. I spent a lot of time explaining just how horribly the Democratic Party messed up, and not only that, also hopefully some of the history and the context behind why it did. But I also do think that there's some people that critique the Democratic Party and why they messed up who I wouldn't necessarily say that it's fake news, but I would say that there are a lot of people who, regardless of what their politics are looking for quick fixes. They're looking for those pop-up ads that show up on on websites like, hey, like this is what they don't want you to know about refinancing your home or whatever. I think that kind of shortcuts attitude is seeped into everything. So there's some people that I probably agree with, but they are looking for too simple answers as well. But that's kind of different than fake news. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I was a little flippant in the beginning when you asked me that. It's just because I think we could say very specifically, like, okay, someone like Alex Jones with like a whole universe built on conspiracy theories. Maybe that, we could be really specific and say that's fake news. Or we could say, Fox News is a propaganda network, or, some of those silly pro-Hillary Clinton websites or something like that. But I think that it's seeped so much into common usage that unless we're describing something really specific, like, hey, that story you're sharing is not a real story, and you should know that. I think it's just kind of a descriptor for what we don't like and what we don't respect and what's the problem. I think it's kind of losing some of its bite. It's probably because Trump uses it all the time too, and hacks and partisans of every persuasion are constantly throwing it out. So if somebody tells me something is fake news, that either means that it's complete garbage, which I should ignore, or it might mean that it's a really, really smart underground website that I'm embarrassed I'm not reading yet.
I definitely agree with your interpretation of what fake news is and is not, right? So there's a dichotomy that exists. There is, in fact, a branch of news out there, but it's not new, right? This is not a new phenomenon, right. The kind of fake news that you described in the former half. Your Alex Joneses, your Daily Mails, your Standards, your magazines that appeal to the most base instincts of any political partisan hack that is simply meant to massage their egos, make the other party seem as though it's the worst thing that ever existed in the history of the universe. And then there's this new trend in fake news, right? The fake news that exists in modern political discourse that began with the Washington Post hiring, what was it, Proper Not, to expose 200, 200 quote unquote media outlets peddling Russian propaganda, when, as you said, they were just basically alternative media sources. So,
Right.
we have to be able to parse that out, right? So, like in the latter case, the case I just described, in the second half, it's a moral panic. It's a moral panic founded upon, I would say, an inability from mainstream sources to contend with the proliferation of counter narratives to whatever they're pushing. I think that 2016 is really the first year we've seen such a conflagration of Twitter, alternative YouTube channels, sites besides Daily Codes, because there is that sort of old guard left media. Your Daily Codes, your Daily Beast, your Huffington Post, your Vox, that used to be new media, but now even they're going the way of the establishment, and now you have a new guard coming in that's not afraid to critique the Democratic Party, that's not afraid to critique the establishment, that's not even afraid to critique the capitalist structure that those things are built upon. And where it becomes problematic is that now this, the criteria for new fake news seems to be built upon the Russian narrative, right? This Russiagate, I'm saying Russiagate is the kind of narrative that very loudly and busily goes nowhere. And it's going nowhere. But with with situations like Michael Flynn asking for immunity, and Eric Prince coming out that he was having secret meetings with Russian spies, like we see this cycle repeating itself in social media of we're gonna finally get, as Matt Taibbi put in his article in Rolling Stone, we're gonna finally get the big reveal. We're gonna finally get the big smoking gun, and we're finally going to be able to impeach Trump. And that to me is the most dangerous part of this. That the resistance, quote unquote, the hashtag resistance, has made their primary goal impeaching Trump, by any means necessary.
Right. And well, just the idea of thinking of like some resistance surrogate on MSNBC saying by any means necessary is pretty funny. That's my first thought. I'll work it backwards from there. I think that, I think you're on target. I just think that there's a lot of different things that we need to kind of distinguish and parse out, so we don't fall into our own traps. So like the Eric Prince story and the Michael Flynn story are actually important stories in and of themselves, even if they don't fit. I think the immunity thing with Michael Flynn, I'm not convinced that really means anything, and I don't know what story he has to tell. But I do think that his dishonesty about his contacts with Russian ambassador is a completely legitimate thing to talk about. The irony with Michael Flynn is that Michael Flynn literally was actually a paid agent of a foreign government, not Russia, but Turkey. And that's actually a big story. That has pretty big implications for U.S. foreign policy towards the Kurds, and how we handle that part of the world. And also Michael Flynn was, hell-bent on war with Iran. So these are important things. The Eric Prince story, that's another great example, too. That's a very real story.